we've been in consultation with the FBI in regard to this matter, and while I can't speak...
At 11:08 p.m. in a sealed federal briefing room on the edge of Chicago's warehouse belt, the opening statement didn't sound like theater. It sounded like a ledger being read out loud. 3 tons of contraband recovered, $63 million in dirty stack identified, cash, bearer instruments, and structured transfers, 42 warrants executed across the Chicago metro, 26 arrests in the first wave, and 1 foreign trade official taken into custody as a covert cartel financier. Chicago, Illinois. Cicero, Bedford Park, Elk Grove Village, Joliet, and the rail and river corridors that move America's freight like blood through arteries. The official's next line landed like a hard verdict. This is the most dangerous logistics infiltration we've ever documented in this region. Then he looked straight down the room, straight through the cameras, like he wasn't talking to journalists anymore. He was talking to the public. We're going to show you how deep it goes. A pause long enough to feel. And the next part is worse. Because the next part wasn't about one warehouse, it wasn't about one semi-trailer, it wasn't about one bag of cash. It was about how a transnational cartel can become invisible when it learns to wear a suit, and how Chicago, with its rail hubs, intermodal yards, and endless freight movement, can be turned into a perfect machine for smuggling. In this fictional story, the cartel called itself something clean and corporate. The Meridian Exchange, a Chicago-based logistics and border smuggling network that ran like a shipping company on the surface and like a drug empire underneath. And at the center, behind procurement paperwork and trade facilitation emails, stood a foreign official who knew every loophole and every handshake. His name is Deputy Trade Commissioner Sandor Velic. Fictional, polished, and, for years, protected by the magic word criminals love most: diplomacy. If you're still watching, keep your eyes on the clock, because when the raid started, they didn't begin with sirens. They began with synchronized silence. At 4:32 a.m., Chicago, Illinois, a thin winter fog drifted between streetlights and loading docks, turning the industrial district into a dull gray maze. Freight yards sat half awake, steel containers stacked like cliffs, cranes frozen mid-gesture, rails humming faintly as distant engines idled. The city was quiet in the specific way Chicago gets quiet before dawn. Not calm, contained, as if the whole place knew something was about to break. Unmarked vehicles rolled into position along back service roads, headlights off, radios low. FBI agents stepped out first, black jackets, badges clipped, faces hard. Dia followed, not because they were chasing headlines, but because contraband never travels alone. Where there's smuggling, there's narcotics. Where there's narcotics, there's money. ICE tactical teams stacked next, disciplined and fast, built for doors that don't open willingly. DACE units, sealed perimeter intersections, blocking exits, watching rooftops, cutting off the city's back alleys like they were veins. And SWAT teams took the breach points. This wasn't one raid, it was a grid. They hit multiple cartel points at once. An underground casino operating behind a private club near an industrial strip. A cartel run bar where truckers were paid in cash and silence. A massage front used as a meeting node. A warehouse district security office that was really a dispatch hub. A freight forwarding company that filed hundreds of manifests a month. Too many for a small operation. A rail-adjacent storage yard with containers that never appeared in public inventory. And a fortified drug fortress mansion on the far edge of the metro, where the money met the muscle. At 4:33 a.m., the first breach. A steel door shuttered under a ram. Once, twice, third hit, lock snapped. Flashbang, a white pulse of light that turned the hallway into a frozen snapshot. Then the entry teams moved, black helmets, rifles tight, voices sharp, federal agents. Down. Down, inside the freight forwarding office, suspects ran immediately. Because people who think they're safe never run that fast. One man grabbed a laptop and bolted for a back stairwell. An agent caught him at the landing, slammed him into the wall, and the laptop hit the concrete, skidding. Another suspect tried to stuff a phone into a microwave. Too late. An FBI tech already had a Faraday bag in hand. Because the task force knew what Meridian Exchange was built on. Not just product, data, schedules, clearance. At 4:41 a.m. in Bedford Park, SWAT breached a warehouse with no signage and a loading dock that never looked busy. Because it didn't need to. It moved at night. Inside, pallets were wrapped in plastic and labeled ceramic tile and auto parts. The top layer was legitimate. That's what made it dangerous. Because legitimate cargo is camouflage. Agents pried open a lower pallet and found vacuum-sealed bricks, powdered contraband wrapped tight. A DIA agent cut a corner and tested it. Cocaine. Clean. High grade. By 5:07 a.m., the initial count from that single site hit 1.2 tons. And it wasn't the only site. At 4:52 a.m., ICE teams hit a transit house near Cicero. From the outside, it looked ordinary. Rental furniture, porch light on, nothing dramatic. Inside, the smell told a different story. Sweat, bleach, and stale air. Interior doors had keypad locks. A whiteboard listed names, dates, and route notes. Migrant corridor, shift be quiet load, 2 vans, docks drop, south lot. Migrant smuggling wasn't the main product. It was cover noise. It was camouflage. It was another revenue stream. It was also a way to overwhelm enforcement and keep attention divided. At 5:18 a.m., DIA hit a small industrial unit near a rail spur. The air inside was chemical and dry. Fans ran constantly. Plastic sheeting lined a room like a cheap laboratory. This wasn't a full-scale drug super lab, but it was enough. Pill presses. Packaging trays. Stamp dies. Counterfeit fentanyl pills in plastic bins, pressed to mimic pharmaceuticals. A small operation but lethal. An agent counted bags like they were counting grief. 20,000, 40, 60. By 5:44 a.m., the team logged over 180,000 fentanyl pills from that single unit. Not millions. Still catastrophic. At 5:57 a.m., the first raid delivered its twist. In a rail yard office trailer, supposedly used for on-site inventory management, agents found a hidden panel behind a cabinet. Inside, a server rack, still running. LED lights, blinking like a heartbeat. Beside it sat sealed steel boxes with tamper screws. No labels, no markings, just weight. The kind of containers people use when they're hiding something that isn't just illegal, but politically radioactive. An FBI tech popped the first seal. Inside, encrypted hard drives, a printed ledger of container numbers, and a slim folder with a single phrase stamped across the front. Diplo clearance. Under that, a signature line. Sandor Velik, Deputy Trade Commission, and a second page showing priority lanes through inspection schedules. Not bribery, not influence peddling. A system of protection. At 7:36 a.m. in an FBI cyber forensics lab, analysts began doing what raids can't do. They made the invisible visible. Cold fluorescent lights. Coffee gone untouched. Screens lined up like windows into a different world. They imaged the drives, isolated the servers, cracked encryption layers, and at 9:08 a.m., the network map bloomed across the main display like a disease chart. Codename, Operation Iron Veil, because this cartel didn't hide in the streets. It hid inside infrastructure. Shell companies stacked on shell companies. Ghost corporations registered to mailbox stores and vacant lots. Sham charities with comforting names, Chicago Workforce Renewal, Midwest Relief Fund, Harbor Youth Initiative, collecting donations that became consulting fees, restaurant chains used for cash commingling, logistics firms used to mask movement, a green freight startup used to justify unusual warehouse leases and equipment transfers. Money flows crossed borders in disguised transfers, small enough to avoid alarms, frequent enough to build fortunes. Funds moved out, looped through offshore accounts, and returned as investment capital. Then the analysts found the command layer, an encrypted authorization key used to approve high-risk shipments, trigger pressure relief protocols, and reroute containers away from canine units and secondary inspections. That key was linked to Sandor Velik, a foreign trade official turned covert cartel financier, not a street boss, a paperwork boss, a man who could weaponize legitimacy. And the map showed what he had built Chicago into: a secure drug empire hub, a cartel fortress made of rail schedules, warehouse leases, and inspection loopholes. That's when the supervising agent said the line everyone in that lab already felt in their bones. This is not corruption. He pointed at the authorization logs. This is command-level collusion. A beat. And this is not negligence. He zoomed in on the priority lane protocol. This is engineered treason. And then came the open loop, the one that makes a story like this turn darker instead of ending. If Velik is the clearance key, the agent said, then the real machine is still running. At 3:51 a.m. the next day, the command center in the Chicago Metro came alive. A giant digital map covered the wall, dozens of red markers pulsing across industrial corridors, rail hubs, warehouse districts, and port of entry adjacent routes. Cicero, Bedford Park, Joliet, South Chicago, O'Hare cargo corridors, intermodal yards, river-adjacent storage points. Each red marker was a node of Meridian Exchange, and each node had been protected by paperwork and silence. The unified mission came with numbers that sounded like a deployment. Over 1,200 federal agents, dozens of SWAT teams and rotating strike groups, FBI tactical and fugitive teams assigned to high-value targets, DIA squads focused on narcotic seizures and chem site safety, ICE units assigned to human trafficking and migrant smuggling interdictions, Daesh cyber operators embedded with entry teams to seize servers before wipe orders could hit, Black Hawk helicopters staged for overwatch and rapid extraction, armored units positioned for fortified sites, and additional federal coordination assets on alert for corridor containment, because when a network like this feels heat, it doesn't fight like a gang. It scatters like a corporation. At 4:18 a.m., the eradication phase began. Simultaneous hits, fast and clean. A cartel superlab site, bigger than the first, was breached in an industrial block outside Joliet. Not a Hollywood lab, a practical one. Chemical barrels, ventilation, packaging lines, a press station, methamphetamine processing in one room, counterfeit pills staging in another. Agents seized product, shut down chemicals, and pulled chemists out in cuffs before they could torch evidence. In Elk Grove Village, agents hit a warehouse yard with containers marked as electronics. Inside, false walls. Behind the false walls, contraband bundles, cocaine, and additional illicit cargo. In a South Side storage site, a server farm was seized, communication hubs, encrypted radios, and a digital container rotation system that made contraband movement look like normal shipping. In a suburban mansion, the drug fortress, the team found weapons, cash, and a safe room built for brief stays. Not comfort. Escape. By 10:22 a.m., the seizure totals stacked up. Contraband, 3 tons across multiple sites, cocaine as the primary product, and additional narcotics discovered along the same corridors. Millions in cash, bearer instruments, luxury assets, weapons caches, encrypted servers, hard drives, and a ledger that listed inspection relief payments next to names that weren't supposed to be on any criminal document. The foreign official, Sandor Velik, was taken down quietly. No dramatic chase, just the sound of a door opening, a warrant being read, and cuffs clicking on a man who had spent years believing his title made him untouchable. His face didn't show panic. It showed offense, as if consequences were an administrative mistake. 6 hours. That's all it took. And the underworld took more damage in 6 hours than in the last 6 years. Then the investigators opened the deeper wound. Inside law enforcement and government, they examined seized servers, port access logs, inspection schedules, internal emails, patrol records, and dispatch reroutes. And the infiltration wasn't widespread in a cartoon way. It was targeted, strategic, enough to bend reality. They identified compromised personnel, port compliance staff, private security supervisors, and select enforcement adjacent contacts who could influence where attention went. 31 individuals flagged for compromise indicators, not all sworn officers, but all critical, because a cartel doesn't need to buy every badge. It just needs to buy the bottlenecks. Patterns emerged with terrifying precision. Way stations down for maintenance on convoy nights. Canine teams reassigned at the last minute. Inspection lanes switched quietly. Patrol grids falsified so units were always busy away from key corridors. Internal leaks of raid schedules, partial, fragmented, just enough to let certain targets dump devices and move product hours before entry teams arrived. One honest officer, fictional Sergeant Maribel Knox, stared at an email chain where a routine inspection adjustment matched the exact arrival time of a Meridian exchange container. She didn't raise her voice, she just said, "That's my signature on the shift roster." And you could hear the betrayal in the way she said "my." Federal agents arrested senior facilitators, shift planners, compliance leads, and a deputy logistics liaison who had access to the same priority lane system Velic controlled. They weren't muscle, they were structure. And structure is what makes cartels last. The task force realized what they were looking at. A parallel enforcement system, a second secret police force not with sirens but with approvals, a shadow layer that decided what got searched and what sailed through, controlled by the cartel's financiers and by the foreign official who turned trade policy into a smuggling shield. The final line from the internal review team landed like a vow. The system will be rebuilt from the ground up. Then the lens widened beyond Chicago, because Chicago was the hub. But the routes were continental. Trucking contractors moved loads outward under legitimate freight cover. Agricultural corridors carried produce shipments that moved too fast to sit for inspection. Port cities connected via shipping lanes and container swaps. Fake green energy grants and infrastructure contracts were used to justify warehouse leases, equipment movements, and facility upgrades that created perfect concealment. Analysts estimated the network could move multiple tons of narcotics per week without triggering major alerts, not because the system was blind, but because the system was being managed. Shipping manifests altered by small edits. Container weights adjusted. Scan schedules manipulated. And whenever enforcement pressure rose, migrant smuggling and human trafficking activity spiked nearby. Noise, distraction, operational smoke. Then they found the final, catastrophic file. Iron Veil/continuity. It wasn't a confession, it was a corporate plan. A blueprint to make the smuggling corridor permanent, turning Chicago into the long-term headquarters of Meridian Exchange, protected by paperwork, compromised bottlenecks, and diplomatic cover. And the chilling realization was typed in clean, unemotional language. Protection is more valuable than product. Meaning, once the cartel controls protection, it can move anything. Cocaine, heroin, meth, fentanyl, pills, people, money, and it can do it for years. Not by hiding from the system, by redesigning it. Now the story ends where it should always end, with what this costs. Because power doesn't always need open violence. Sometimes it only needs silence and ambition. Sometimes it only needs a few signatures, a few reroutes, and a public that assumes trade is too boring to be dangerous. Cocaine isn't just a headline. It's neighborhoods poisoned slowly. Fentanyl pills aren't just numbers. They're funerals in the middle of the week. Heroin isn't just a narcotic. It's families watching someone disappear while still breathing. Meth isn't just a drug. It's communities that stop sleeping. Human trafficking and migrant smuggling aren't cases. They're human beings treated like cargo. If you're still watching, tap like so more people see this story. Comment expose if you want this kind of corruption, fictional or real-world patterns dragged into the light, because these networks survive on darkness and distraction. And one more time, clearly, so nobody confuses fiction for a real report. This is fiction. Names were invented. Events were dramatized for storytelling. But the warning is real. When a cartel stops acting like a gang and starts acting like a supply chain, the most dangerous weapon isn't the gun. It's the clearance stamp.